everyone, and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host, Yvonne Heath, author of the book Love Your Life to Death, and founder of the I Just Showed Up movement. So I am so excited about my guest today. It's like a part two from part one last month when I interviewed the lovely Rick Prashaw, and today I get to spend time with John Dickout. Hello, John. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I am just absolutely wonderful. So it was funny when I interviewed Rick at the end of the show. I called him immediately and I said, Rick, there's so much more we need to talk about. We need to talk. I need to talk to John. And he said, well, I'm sure that he'd be happy to chat with you. And here we are. So welcome to the show. I'm so excited. Would love you to share a little bit. Let's get to know John a little bit. Tell us about you and your life, and we'll go from there.
Wow, could be a long story.
But... Well, yes, we'll do the Reader's Digest version.
I'm 57. I live in Burlington, Ontario, with my lovely wife, Lynn. I have two daughters. One's in near Ottawa, in a little town called Winchester. And my other daughter is in Oakville, Jamie and Kristen. And I am celebrating my third anniversary as an actor. I was previously a director at a fairly large call center, director of training and organizational development, and had been living in the Philippines and overseeing North America and the Philippines. And decided to become an actor a few years ago.
Wow, that is absolutely such a really cool story. I love that, deciding to become an actor in your 50s, and that's for the second act of your life, right? Something totally different. I think that's fantastic. And so it sounds like, and from what I read, you had a wonderful, active life, and then something changed. John, can you share a little bit about how your life changed? Took a turn for the not better.
Yeah, and of course that's kind of where those two careers collided, I suppose. So Lynn, my wife, and I were while I was working in the Philippines. In about 2007, I was traveling to the Philippines a lot, and in late 2009, my boss was looking for someone to move to the Philippines to oversee operations there, provide some extra leadership. So we decided to move there, and things were going pretty great. We were there for almost, I guess, about 3 years altogether. In 2013, I woke up one night in the middle of the night, and my heart was racing, and didn't think a lot of it. We had just actually moved from one apartment to another, and I'd had a really busy week working at a couple of our off-site locations, working long hours. So I just kind of put it to fatigue. And we had a standing date of golf with a bunch of expats in Manila. And so we got up Sunday morning, and we went through our regular routine, went to golf, but I just didn't feel well. And I didn't pass my wife, who was at the time an emergency nurse, said I didn't pass her look test. Mm-hmm. And other people kind of said I wasn't looking great. I was clammy and sweaty, which you are in the Philippines a lot anyway. So after the round of golf, I insisted we finish, of course. I agreed to go to the hospital and get checked out, and they immediately admitted me, and one thing after another, one test after another, and determined that I'd had some kind of a pretty significant heart event. And within 2 weeks, I had crashed, flatlined for 8 seconds, and had a defibrillator implanted in my chest. Was told by the doctor I was at risk of sudden death, and it was a pretty whirlwind few weeks. So about after kind of stabilizing after a couple of months, we came back to Canada, and I was introduced to, or eventually referred to, Dr. Heather Ross at the Peter Munk Cardiac Center in Toronto General Hospital. And it was not long after that where they said that at some point the end of the road is going to be a heart transplant, which was enormously shocking. And just to back up a little, I was in pretty good health before that. I still was running on the treadmill a couple times a week at least. We played golf every weekend, as I said. We ate healthily. There was no family history, no reason for this to have happened. So it was pretty surreal. And at that time they said, she was hopeful that we would, put a plan together. Well, we did put a plan together to improve the function of my heart. And the thinking was it would probably be about 10 years before I would need a transplant. And after about 2 years, things just weren't getting better. My health was declining. And I just kind of decided I didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I decided to get listed for transplant. And that was November. No, yeah, when I made the decision in probably late September, early October. It was after myriad tests and evaluations, psychological and physiological, of course. I was officially listed on November 25th, 2015.
Right.
And a week later, I still have the piece of paper in a drawer somewhere. I was being asked at the time to write a list of, just make my end-of-life preparations. Sorry.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to try too. Don't worry. It's all good. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, just, prepare, make for your funeral and just all that stuff. And I couldn't do it. I had been a guy who, I have a tattoo on my ankle that is a golden attitude. In between careers, I had a consultancy that I did personal and professional development, and I called it Golden Attitude Performance Solutions. And my whole premise has always been, set goals and carpe diem and live life to the fullest and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I can't focus right now on things that on my death. I need to focus on my life. So I kind of put their instructions aside, and I just jotted down quickly a list of I like 6 or 7 things that I would do when I survive, not if I die. So, and one of the things on the list was to become an actor. So a few months later, when I got the call and I had my heart transplant, and here I am. So I had to follow up on that promise I'd made to myself.
Oh my goodness, John, there's just so much to this story, and I have to make sure that I don't start talking about everything that I'm passionate about, because that whole end of life planning piece, when you're possibly facing your end of life, it's an awful time to think about it. And that's my whole thing of, let's talk about that when we're young and healthy, so that, right, someone isn't saying to you when you're hopeful to live and to find, a new life, people aren't saying, so it's time to plan your funeral. It's awful. And incredible that you had those sayings and carpe diem and everything. I'm sure that's like, okay, wait a minute, I have to walk my talk. And I'm sure that's a lot of what propelled you forward. So thank goodness for that. You were otherwise healthy, and for that incredible attitude that you had. So tell me about that moment. And of course we're going to cry in here, John. Why? Because it's an emotional roller coaster. This is grief and joy, grief and joy. I never apologize for my tears. The moment that, like, you're actually on a transplant list, you've accepted, I'm on a list, and you're waiting for that phone to ring. I can't imagine what it's like. And then when that phone actually rings, tell us about that call.
It's really interesting, I guess partially in hindsight, but for me, the most difficult day emotionally, there were a couple, but I think the most difficult day emotionally in that where it's like the stuff hits the fan and the realization wasn't the day of my first phone call. I actually had three, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. um, it was the day I was having, of course, being followed closely by a cardiologist, Dr. Ross, and I was in there every 3 months or 3 to 6 months for sure, and just regular checkups because I was in rough shape. And I remember Dr. Ross telling Lennon and I that you scare me. You just can't get a handle on it. And it really actually wasn't diagnosed until after pathology on my heart, after it had been replaced, that they've determined what the cause was. But one day we walked into one of these routine checkups, and they were very typical. An intern or fellow would come in and do their kind of assessment and talk to me and get an update, and they would go through the history, and then they would go and brief Dr. Ross, who would come in, and she's a rock star. If anybody ever has the chance to meet Dr. Heather Ross, they should do it. She'd always walk in the room, and it was, "Hey team, all right, so how's it going, and how you doing today, or how are we today, whatever." Mm-hmm. So on this particular day in October-ish of 2015, she came in. How you doing today? How's it going, team? And I just kind of looked at her and said, "I'm okay." And we had already established a relationship over the couple of years that I'd be seeing her, and that she knew that wasn't me. I was the golden attitude guy. It was more likely for me to say, if I were any better, I'd be two people. And she just stopped and she looked at me, and I got pretty emotional. And she rolled her chair up to me. I have such a vivid memory of this, and took my hands in hers, and she said, "It's time, isn't it?" Mm. Oh. So that was the day that the first day where I really, really thought about my mortality. Mm-hmm. And that was the decision. That was the day that I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. Mm. So once we shed our tears, and for me, it was like, I gave myself a head shake and say, "Okay, set up on my chair. What do we do? Mm-hmm. What do we do tomorrow? What do we do the next day? I'm going to be the best heart recipient there ever was, because that's the way I do things." So fast forward, listed November 25th, and December 23rd of 2016. So Lynn and I, on a regular basis, do a bit of a date night, holiday or holiday weekend kind of thing around Christmas every year. We used to live in Niagara region, Welland, outside of Welland. We would go to Niagara Falls. It's like 25 minutes away, but we'd get one of those, I don't know, wag jag or whatever, where you get a hotel and a night of $25 for the casino or whatever. But it was like just a complete getaway. We played tourist for a weekend. Well, on this particular weekend, or that year, we decided to do it in Toronto. A gal that I had acted with many years ago was in Kinky Boots. So we said, let's do that. Let's get tickets to Kinky Boots, and we stayed at the Royal York. So the December 23rd in the morning, we're sitting at breakfast, and Lynn's phone rings. My wife's phone rings, and I see her saying, "Yes, yeah, he's right here." And she handed the phone over to me, and "Hi, John. It's the Toronto General Hospital. We have a heart for you." And I was expecting it to be 12 months from the time I got listed. This was less than 1 month. And I said, as I'm talking to her, and it was interesting. They said, "The challenge is it hasn't been 100% confirmed if you are the right match, but time is of the essence. You'd need to be at the hospital within an hour or so." I said, "I'm having breakfast at the Royal York." I could walk there in that time. So yeah, we could be there for sure. Okay, well, don't do anything yet. The doctors are still talking things through. Just sit tight. Meanwhile, I'm looking across the table at Wynn, who's all the blood had rushed out her face. She's whiter. I said, "Can you hold for a minute? I think my wife's going to faint." I think that call was a little more stressful for Lynn than it was for me at that time. So it turned out to be a false alarm. The heart went to someone else, I guess. I never really heard what happened exactly, but they did call back after we sat there for 20 minutes or so and said, it's not going to happen today, but, sit tight. So we went home very stressed and very tired from a bit of an emotional roller coaster in that few minutes. A month to the day later, January 23rd, 2016, we were watching television one evening and my phone rings and I just remember this voice so clearly. "Hi, John. My name is Candy. I'm calling from the Toronto General Hospital. We have a heart that's a match, but I want you to know that there's actually 2 matches for this heart and the other person is higher priority. So it's probably not going to be for you, but we'd like you to come to the hospital anyway, just in case." Which was, frankly, the best thing that could have happened because it gave me time to just chill. And by the way, since that false alarm on December 23rd, I had a bag packed every night sitting at the end of the bed, just in case. So but it took all the pressure off. We had no expectation that I was likely to be that night. Hopped in the car. In fact, I drove to Toronto. It was very calm. I went into emergency while Lynn parked the car. I went up to registration, went to the ICU, and they said, "Okay, well, here's the waiting room." Somebody came in and talked to us and said, "We'll still have, we're in the process. This other person is probably going to get the heart, but just sit tight." Half an hour later, they came out and apologized. Apologize? Wait, is the other guy getting the transplant? Yes. Well, that's good news. That's no reason to apologize.
Wow.
So we turned around and went home. The next night, January 24th, well, it was actually about the 25th at about 3 in the morning or something like that. The phone rings again. Bedside phone. Hi, John, it's Candy again. We have another heart, and this one's for you. So the best thing that could have happened is I'd had a dress rehearsal the night before. We went through exactly all the procedures we needed to do, and I drove to the hospital again, and by, I don't know, we got there, but I guess we got to the hospital about 3. By 6 o'clock, I was getting worked up and wheeled to the operating room, and by 8 a.m., my surgery was started, and 2 in the afternoon of January 25th, 2016, my transplant was complete.
I just have to take a breath here.
Of course.
Because there's so much that we need to talk about. And John, I think that we're going to have to do 2 shows.
All right.
Seriously, because this is so important. And I know there's so many people that are on that waiting list and they're on that, that trajectory of getting those calls and then it's a false alarm. I can't even imagine what that is like. And when you talk about this whole, from having a healthy life, not seeing this coming, being a really healthy guy with a positive attitude, and to needing a life-saving heart transplant. I just want to step back. What is that like? And I mean, for your family, for your children, was this like did you really connect in a deeper way? Was everyone just, you have to be a mess. I'm sure it was a mess.
Yeah. I'm extraordinarily lucky that I have a tremendous support system and amazing family. And, we had gone through tough times before. And frankly, Lynn and I were living in the Philippines and my daughters were here in Canada when I got sick in the first place. So that was a pretty big stressor immediately. And but I think because of the strength of our relationship, it was if anything strengthened. It's interesting because when my transplant coordinators talk to us about that, like they it's interesting how a lot of times, in fact, they warn you about this in pre-transplant, and you're going through kind of counseling and stuff, that it can be very, very difficult on families, and a lot of families will break apart because of it. Mm-hmm. And we were the opposite, frankly. And I said, I talk about this in business. It's like if you imagine a pressure cooker, it doesn't matter if you've got a good, solid pressure cooker that has no seams and no cracks, it's working properly. It doesn't matter how far you turn up the pressure, it's going to still be fine. If it has a crack in it that you've never seen before, you turn up enough pressure, it's going to explode. And I think it's the kind of the similar situation. There are probably those relationships that break down is because there's something there that's not quite right, maybe, and it's just never had to go through this kind of intense pressure. So I think it's important to, make sure you fix those cracks when they're little.
Absolutely. And again, with, my whole message of the fact that we don't talk about plan and prepare for grief and life's challenges before they arrive. So if you already have, challenges in your relationships, and then this life-threatening situation with tremendous levels of grief and anger, denial, all of those things just compile, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right? And again, we always have that choice. We always have a choice of what we do with what we've been handed, right? We don't always have the choice we wish we had. Yep. And so I would love to, I want to wrap up because I think that we're going to continue this conversation. John, is that okay? Can I keep you longer than we planned?
Oh, absolutely. First, it's funny. I had in my mind it was going to be an hour, so.
Yes, well, now it is.
Okay.
But I want to just, when people, I have been the nurse at the bedside of those conversations about organ donation, and I have to say it is excruciating, and part of that is the fact that we don't talk about it before, and we don't register before. And I just want to read a few statistics just so people understand what a gift this is. There are over 1,600 Canadians waiting for life-saving organ donation. Every 3 days, someone dies. 35% of Ontarians are registered, which is 4.4 million of 12.5 million that potentially could qualify, and very few people actually qualify. So I just tell people, register as an organ donor at beadonor.ca, and let them decide if you're age, if you're qualified, let them decide, just register.
Yeah.
And then you never have to have your family have that conversation.
Yeah, and it really is both. Have the conversation so that your family's aware of your desires and takes the pressure off them because it's a horrible time to have to make that kind of a decision. The interesting statistic that I would like to add to yours is that 90% of Canadians support organ donation, but only 35 are registered.
We didn't even get to why you and Rick and this beautiful love story with Adam, and there's just so much to talk about because your story is extraordinary, and we see from your story that healthy people can end up needing a transplant, right? And actually, I have heard that people say you are more likely to need a transplant than to be an organ donor, right? So it's just such an important conversation, and I want to continue having this conversation because we always have a choice, as I say, and this is a tremendous story of grief and joy, and taking a very challenging story and creating something so positive and extraordinary from that pain and trauma. And I'm not even going to let anybody know the rest of the story, John, unless they stay tuned for the second part. And I do want to just have a full show talking about the extraordinary relationship between you, Rick, and Adam, because it gives people hope. It gives people hope that no matter what they have been through, you can create something positive from that, right? And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having the courage to want to keep living, for having the courage to say, you know what, carpe diem, I need to be on that transplant list. I need to create a new life. And it is just a beautiful story, a beautiful love story that we are going to share. So I hope everyone stays tuned for the second half of our show. Thank you again, John. We're going to keep chatting. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. This has been Real Life Talks, a show about learning how to just show up for yourself, just show up for each other, and live life to the fullest. If you want to be able to do that, I encourage everyone to plan your life, plan your death, including registering as an organ donor, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. This is Rogers TV. Aurelia.
When you don't have the people there to support you that you know you should, your world kind of like spirals. But United Way has been the biggest change coming into high school. Having the ability to help kids succeed is so important.
Sometimes it's hard to say goodbye to an old friend. But when you're saying farewell to your vehicle, Kidney Car makes it fast and easy.